same old OB52 tier list. Once again, as per usual, the little disclaimer. Firstly, this is my opinion. This is nobody else's opinion. It's just my opinion. If you agree with me, then cool. If you don't, I don't care. Secondly, this is for competitive play, not ranked. I mean, esports play. However, it does still apply to most casuals, to most ranked games. I mean, you know how it is. It's like, if it works in esports, it's probably gonna work in fucking casual games. That being said, there might be some differences here and there. So, if you see Sky being fucking C tier, and that outrages you, I don't care. And it's not actually viable. Okay? Okay. So, as per usual, we're gonna start from A, and we'll move down to Z. Well, I guess Jin's not actually in this, in the tier list since he's a new champion, but this time Ashe will actually be in the tier list, so. First and foremost, Roxas. Roxas has been S tier for quite a while now, and I think finally he's kinda moving down a little bit. He's not worse. It's interesting, because he's not really worse. He's just not as heavily prioritized. You don't need an Roxas. I think the other damage dealers are getting to be useful as some of the other ones, or as Roxas is. I think Roxas is still better than them due to the fact that he can get up on high ground. Like, having that high ground control is limited to only a few different champions, and Roxas is really the only good Haven damage dealer that can get up on high ground, right? Cassie can't, Lex can't, Victor can't, so because of that, he's still a bit better, even though I think he's comparable to a Lex, to a Cassie outside of that. He's still a little bit better than them, plus he has the high ground control, so he's still better than them, but I don't think he's really S tier anymore. Like, he's not, you don't have to be first picking him, you're not going to see any teams first pick him. You might even see teams wait a while, because you don't need him, especially on maps that don't have a lot of high ground. Ashe. So, Ashe is interesting. She's bad, but she's good. The main difference here is that she is absolute garbage in casual games. And, like, she can do some damage and whatever, but realistically speaking, if I go into a game and I pick Ashe, I have no influence over the game. Because the one thing that she does is she bullies people. She does kind of fill a bruiser role. I wouldn't say she's like the best at it, but she is okay at it, and she can actually chase people down, and she can be annoying, she can be in their face, and she can stop them from doing anything. Even if she's not killing anybody, it's still kind of the same thing that Fernando does, right? Fernando gets in your face, like he'll go on your support, right? Fernando just lemmings your support, gets on the Snake or the Saris or whatever, forces them to use their escape, and then suddenly no one's getting healed. And Ashe does a similar thing, but better, I would say. I don't think she's going to be an early pick. I don't think she's ever going to be picked, like, just because. I think if you want to run Ashe, you need a pretty specific comp, and she needs a specific situation, but when she's picked, she could potentially be okay. Like, you can bully some people, and you can be kind of obnoxious. I don't think we're going to see her played too much, but she has some potential. She can actually do something, unlike, say, Sky. Barrack, I think Barrack was A tier before, but I think he's A plus tier now. I think what it comes down to is, like, there's what, 6 tanks? Is there 6 tanks? Yeah, there's 6 tanks, and I think they have a very clear list of priority. It's not like you're picking one tank to counter another, or you're doing anything like that. It's literally just say, like, this one is better than this one, this tank's better than that tank, and it's just like a hierarchy, basically, of some tanks are better, some tanks are worse. And I think Barrack is like, he's pretty much like 3rd on the list, right? He's like, he's okay, like, you can pick him, but you're not going to prioritize him. He's just better than the other tanks. He's still a good pick. Like, you can pick him whenever if you want to, but you don't have to prioritize him. Very similar to the Andrew, right? He's better than Ashe, he's better than Fernando. but you're not going to be first picking him, but you can pick him whenever. And that kind of falls into the A+ tier, similarly to Andro. Bomb King I think is still S tier. He's just the best blaster all around, honestly. If you want blast damage, then you get Bomb King. If you can't get Bomb King, then you get Drogos. Or potentially you get 2 Haven damage dealers. But like he's just the best. He's the most consistently picked damage dealer. He's the most consistent damage dealer. He can get in and out of fights, and for like nothing's really changed on him, so he's still a solid S tier, I'd say. Nothing's changed at all regarding the Bomb King. Buck is still kind of just garbage. Honestly, he's getting closer and closer to B tier, I think. Like, he's an okay pick in very specific situations, but generally speaking, he's not going to do very well. It's almost to the point where he's a pocket strat, where you have to do something very specific if you want him to work. But I think as it is right now, he's not quite at that spot yet. So I think he's still like, you can pick him in certain situations. You're just not going to be seeing him a lot. He doesn't really do anything. The best thing he provides is high ground control, but he doesn't really have any he doesn't have any team fight potential. Like, he relies so much on other factors to make him useful, unlike say an Roxas, who's always useful. Cassie I think is still A tier. I think Cassie's still just the straight up definition of A tier. Like, she is a perfectly fine pick. You don't need to prioritize her. She's just a filler. She is like literally the definition of A tier. It's like, you can pick her if you need her. If you don't need her, then whatever. You're not losing anything. Like, she's very well balanced. She works all around. She can work in multiple comps, but you're never ever going to be prioritizing her. She's just an option. Drogos I think is still A+ tier along with the Andro and Barrack. I think Drogos is actually starting to fall down a little bit. We considered that maybe he would potentially go up to S tier, but I really don't think he is. I think if anything he's coming down a little bit. Like, it's pretty easy to deal with him, and it's well, okay, I shouldn't say that. It's not easy to deal with him, but if you deal with him properly, then he becomes very useless. Unlike a Bomb King, where it's like, even if you try to deal with the Bomb King, he can still fuck you up. Drogos can't really do that. Drogos just kind of dies over and over again if he's being dealt with correctly. And like, he's still a lot of damage, and he's still a great option if you want that blast damage and they have the Bomb King. You can pick him in a lot of scenarios, but he's also not prioritized. So it's just like the Andro, just like the Barrack. He's an option, he's a good option, but you never have to prioritize it, and if you want, you can just leave him out of your comp entirely. Unlike Bomb King, where it's like, if Bomb King's open, you're probably going to be picking him almost every time. Evie I think is also A tier. She's been moving up recently. I think she's seeing more and more play. Again, we've talked about this before, but the value of having Haven damage and blast damage in the same team is really important. Like, you need to try to split that damage if possible. There are some exceptions to that, but if you can do it, that is always better. So because of that, and because of Drogos getting slightly worse, and Bomb King being an early pick, like, it's becoming more of an option where Evie can be picked later on in the pick phase, just like Cassie. Not prioritized or anything like that, but she's definitely an option. She's pretty well-rounded. She has 2 builds that work completely differently, so she fits into multiple scenarios. So she's definitely a viable option if you want to play it. Fernando, I think, along with the Buck and Ashe, is probably B+ tier. I wouldn't want to put him in B tier. Like, he's close to B tier, but he's not really there yet. Like, there's definitely situations where Fernando can be good. I think Ashe probably does Fernando's job better, but Fernando also just, like, he's not good, but if you really see a situation where it's like, oh, okay, Fernando could actually be decent here, like, oh, they have a Kanessa, well, I'm gonna go bully the Kanessa. You know, then there's some potential there. It's not just a pocket pick, but it's also not good to just pick up whenever. Grog, I think Grog finally is moving out of C tier. I don't think he's quite C tier. He doesn't go with the Sky, with the Mave. Like, he's not... With the ult change, it's like he has a little bit more survivability, and there's some potential, but I still think if you're going to play him, it's going to have to be a pocket strat of some sort. You have to have some very specific thing in mind if you want to pull off the Grog. It's like, we're on this specific map, we're on this against this specific team comp, hell, maybe Grog will work here. Other than that, though, I really just, I don't really see it. I don't see any particular reason to play him, so I think he's just a solid B tier, honestly. along with the Grover, who's also in B tier. Grover's probably on the verge of being B plus tier, but I'd still say he's kind of a pocket strat. Like, you're not going to be saying, hey, Grover's a decent pick here. You're going to prepare beforehand and say, let's try to get the Grover. If they pick this specific comp, let's get the Grover. Or if we want to play this specific playstyle, let's pick the Grover. He actually did get a lot better. So recently in OB52, there was a change to a lot of cards, or how cooldown reduction works. If you get cooldown reduction that's based on a percentage, so Grover has a card, for instance, that gives him up to 40% cooldown reduction when he gets an elimination. Previously, that worked on the remaining time of your cooldown. So if your cooldown was 10 seconds and the remaining cooldown was 5 seconds, then that 40% reduction would only reduce to 5 seconds. It wouldn't reduce the full 10 seconds. Whereas now it's actually changed, so it will reduce from the base cooldown. So if you get an elimination, it would be 40% reduced of 10 seconds. So even if you're at even if it's a 10-second maximum cooldown, it's at 5 seconds currently, it would still be reduced by 4 seconds on getting elimination. And that actually makes Grover a lot better. A surprising amount. So because of that, potentially we might see some more play for him. Like, he might actually be played a bit more because he can get a lot more healing off, he can get more roots off. So I think there's some potential there. But for the time being, since we haven't really seen any of that yet, I'd still say he's B tier, he's still a pocket strat. But potentially with the buff, he could be a little bit better actually. Inara, I think Inara's just A tier. As I was saying, like, the tanks kind of have this hierarchy of this one's better than this one, and that one's better than another tank, and they kind of just fall in this list of priority. And I think Inara is just that, like, okay, all the tanks are gone, let's get Inara. She's just the filler tank. Just like Cassie and Evie are just filler damage dealers, Inara's the filler tank of, well, we took one tank, they took two tanks, who's left? Well, Inara's left. So because of that, I think Inara's just A tier. The big issue that she has right now is that she has no mobility. She lost a lot of her movement speed when she's shooting, which makes it so she can't really chase kills anymore. She gets so much less damage just because she's not able to chase around corners. She's not able to chase anyone really. Like, she just stands there. And don't get me wrong, that can be useful at times, and you'll still see her picked, you'll still see her played, but at the end of the day, she's just like a, I'm gonna be in your face, I'm gonna be annoying. She's not a damage dealer anymore. She's not even comparable to the Ruckus anymore, in my opinion, who can actually do a lot of damage and actually has some decent mobility. So I'd say she's just A tier, she's just a filler tank. Kanessa, I think Kanessa's in the same spot. If you watched last week, then you know that we put Kanessa in between the A and B plus tier because she wasn't really either of them. She can't just be picked whenever, she can't fill whatever team comp, but she's also so good in the situations that she's picked in that she's not really B plus either. So she's kind of in this awkward limbo between the two. So for the time being at least, we just put her in between the two until something changes. So she's in between B plus and A tier. I guess if anything that would be like an A minus tier. Lex, just like Cassie and Evie, A tier. He can fit into multiple comps. He has some issues regarding high ground and whatnot, but just his mobility allows him, like the 20% speed in your loadout card. It's a nice option to be able to actually get decent flanks off. A lot of the time, Lex is considered an anti-flanker rather than a flanker because he deals so well with like Andro, he deals well with Evie, with Buck, and even tanks as well. So a lot of the time he's considered an anti-flank, but I think with the movement speed he's actually able to do some of both, which makes him a pretty versatile character. Similar to Cassie, right? Cassie can sit back and poke from range, or she can look for a flank and use her roll shot and just roll around in the backline. And Lex does a pretty similar thing, so you can play him, you can kind of play him whenever, but he's definitely not going to be prioritized, and he doesn't fit into every situation perfectly, so I just say he's a solid A tier. Maeve, I mean, you know the story here. Nothing was really changed. Actually, that's not true. She did get a little activation time buff to her Q, so when you press your Q, you're going to get healed faster if you're running that card, which, sure, it's useful, but it's still Maeve. Nothing relevant changed, so she's still just C tier. She can't really be played. You're just going to get dicked on, pretty much. McCullough, I think McCullough's finally out of S plus tier. We put him in S plus tier for a long time because he was so heavily prioritized, and it's just like, you can pick him, you can first pick him every single game if you want to. but times are changing a bit, and I think like he's still perfectly fine, and you still can first pick him every game, but doing so could potentially hinder you. You may be losing out a little bit if you're just first picking McCullough every single time. I mean, he's still the same character, he's still extremely relevant, and having a McCullough is pretty much always a good thing. I can't think of a bad situation to have a McCullough in. But with some of the changes, I think it's like, I wouldn't want to first pick McCullough every single game and just be like, yes, we did it, guys. There's sometimes you gotta prioritize some other stuff, and sometimes you gotta think about what your enemy is going to be doing, right? If you're going into the draft, you're thinking, well, maybe this time McCullough is not the best pick, maybe we can get this instead because they're not going to pick McCullough. Or maybe we can just get McCullough later because the way we're drafting our comp doesn't necessarily need a McCullough and also isn't bad against McCullough. So there's some potential there for him to be like left alone for a little bit, but he's still a perfectly good pick, and if you want to pick him early, you can pick him early. Like, he fits into every scenario possible. Any scenario that I can think of he fits into. You just don't really need to, which is the big difference from last patch. Pip, B+ tier. I mean, it's kind of the same as it was before. He's just a jack of all trades, but he doesn't do anything exceptionally well. He doesn't outperform other carries, he doesn't out-heal other supports, he doesn't out-utility other utility champions, so he's just like, he's a lot of nothing. He can be played, he can work. If you want to make it work, you have to see a very specific situation, and you have to think, okay, well, the Pip might actually be okay here. Like, he can do all these various things, and that's just what we need right now. It's not really a pocket pick, but it's not a pick that you can just blind pick. It's something you need to really prepare for, and you need to see a very specific situation for it. Ruckus. So Ruckus was A+ tier. I think Bear kind of took his place in A+ tier, and I think he moves up to S tier. Like, I think Bomb King, McCullough, and Ruckus are all in that tier of they're going to be picked early. You're going to see them picked early pretty much every game. They're going to be in at least the top 4 picks, top 5 picks. Ruckus still has that crazy anti-tank potential. Like, he's so good at dealing with the other tanks. And in a meta that, I mean, it's essentially still a tank meta. Like, it's a mobility and a tank meta, and those are his 2 best things to play against. Like, playing against a Androxus is perfect for a Ruckus. Like, it's not bad for Androxus to play against Ruckus, but Ruckus doesn't give a shit about an Androxus. He just shoots him and, like, until he runs away, you know? And it's the same thing with, like, the tanks. If he's standing on point with a Fernando or with a Barrack, Ruckus is just gonna stand there and go, okay, let's do it. Let's go. 1v1 me. That's literally what Ruckus does, and he's so tanky, he does so much damage that he's super high priority right now. And then the cherry on top is that he actually has mobility, right? He actually has control of the point by moving around, and the big one is that he can get up on high ground. There's no other tank in the game right now that can so easily just get up on high ground. You just stash straight up right on a bridge or on the high ground anywhere, and that's super important. As we said, it's a mobility meta. It's the same thing for Androxus, right? Being able to get on that high ground is super crucial, especially on certain maps. So if you can do that with the Ruckus, with a tank, it's like, imagine having a Bomb King, Androxus, and Ruckus, right? The Ruckus goes up first, everyone goes, oh shit, there's a Ruckus on our high ground. Everyone goes up to respond to it, and meanwhile, like, Bomb King and Androxus are just running around on the high ground as well, going up and down. So it's like, he's super crucial. He's almost to the point of S+ tier, but I wouldn't say you have to prioritize him. I think a lot of teams will prioritize him, and that wouldn't surprise me at all, but I definitely don't think you have to. Similarly to the McCullough, right? A lot of teams will definitely go, hey, McCullough's open, let's take the McCullough. Same thing with Ruckus, but you definitely don't have to first pick him, especially on certain maps. Saris, I think, is A+ tier. Nothing really changed with her. I think she's just as good as she was before. She's just the best healer in my opinion. Like, she will get the most healing in a situation between Saris and Snake. If it's a mirror match, then Saris will just barely outweigh the Snake in healing. She's just a better healer. in my opinion. She's consistent, she's super flexible in how you want to deal with flankers and whatnot. She can move around, she can stealth out, she has a pretty solid ult with good CC that can potentially turn a fight. So she's just like, you're gonna pick her at some point, right? If she's open, you're gonna pick her. Sheldon's just like the Lex, Cassie, Evie. It's like same old. You can pick him if you want. Potentially B+ tier, honestly. He hasn't really been played much, and he doesn't provide that much to a team. You're probably gonna see more Lexes, more Cassies, more Evies. But, you know, there's some potential there. You might see a specific situation where you go, okay, well, Sheldon's pretty good here. And you definitely can pick him, right? That's the main part of being A tier, is that you can pick him as a filler whenever. Is it the best option? Probably not. You're probably better off with a Cassie or a Lex. But I wouldn't say you need a specific situation for him. So he's not B+ tier. He's not like, you don't need to have a very specific comp. You don't need to have a very specific strategy to use him. But he's also not as good. He's almost in that kind of that Kanessa tier, that A- tier. So he's just an option if you want. I wouldn't recommend playing him too much, but hell, if you can play it, then you can play it. Skye, C tier, don't play Skye. Snake, I think Snake changed a little bit. Before we had Saris A+ tier and Snake A tier. I think honestly I could probably put Snake in A+ tier as well. Like they're equal to each other. You're gonna pick them at the same time. Like you get one or you get the other. No big deal. They're both A+ tier. They're both the perfect healer essentially. Like there's no reason they shouldn't be on the same tier in my opinion. So it's kind of hard to put the supports. It's very hard to compare the supports to the rest of the tier list, because it's like you're gonna need a support, and right now there's only 2 supports to pick. So are they really A+ tier? I don't know, hard to say. But at the end of the day, you're gonna pick them. You're gonna pick either Saris or you're gonna pick Snake. So in that sense, they are kind of A+ tier. It's just hard to compare. Torvald, I think Torvald's finally down to C tier. I don't think he's even good enough for a pocket strat, honestly. Like, I'd rather have a Grover or a Grog than a Torvald at this point. Like, he's a pocket strat plus more. Like, you need to have the most perfect fucking team comp you can ever imagine to ever pull off Torvald. You have to, like, fucking sit there and study Torvald players and fucking be the most... You gotta have, like, a PhD in Torvaldness in order to play him properly in the competitive scene right now. In casuals, maybe you can pull him off a little bit better because people don't buy Wrecker as much and you might be able to just kind of do whatever you want. But realistically speaking, like, you can't do anything. You just stand there. You do nothing. So it's just don't pick him, man. Don't pick him. Wouldn't recommend. Tyra's kind of a pocket strat. No different. I mean, I know that NA play some Tyra here and there, but she's just so easy to deal with, you know? It's like you just, like, if she goes lifesteal, you just get cauterized. If she doesn't go lifesteal, well then she has no sustain. And she's like so dependent on having a pocket healer. Like, it's so easy to just kill a Tyra. She has no mobility, she has no sustain, she has no defensive abilities. You just kill her. Like, you just say, hey, you're an Roxas, you go shoot her. And if she's shooting you, then she's not doing damage to our tanks, which is the only thing she's useful for. So, I don't know. I'd say pocket strat. I wouldn't pick Tyra in any situation unless I had some very specific comp in mind, like a Torvald. Like, hey, let's get a Torvald and a Grover and then pick a Tyra. And then Tyra can just run around and actually not die. So, I don't know. I wouldn't play her. She's just... Yeah, well, I mean, she's basically just a win harder condition. If you're already winning, then yeah, Tyra's gonna look real great. If you're already winning the game, you can do a shit ton of stuff on Tyra. The second you start losing, Tyra will be dead the whole game. Victor, previously we had Victor at A+. I think he's probably A though. I think he's similar to the Cassie and Evie. You just pick him when you need him. You know, he doesn't have to, you don't need a very specific situation for him. You can pick him whenever. But he's also not just like, you're not going to prioritize him over a Cassie or a Lex, you know? You don't need to go, okay, well now we need our last damage dealer. let's make sure to get Victor over the Cassie. You wouldn't do that. You would say, well, let's get Victor or Cassie. Like, which one's going to be better here? So he's not quite A+ tier. He's just like solid A tier. You can pick him. You don't need to pick him. Willow, I think, is still B+ tier. I want to put her in A tier, and I think she definitely has potential in A tier. I still don't think we've really seen enough of Willow. Like, I definitely think she is A tier. But I want to see a little bit more play of her before I say that. Because, I mean, if she's not being picked so much by the teams, she is being played a little bit. But she's being played as much as, say, Fernando is, right? Like, Fernando's being played every now and then by some teams. And Willow's kind of the same. She's being played every now and then by some teams. And until she's being played relatively frequently, I don't think she's going to go up to A tier. Because clearly there's something wrong there. Like, clearly teams are going, okay, well, something's wrong with Willow. We can't just pick her generally. So I'm not sure exactly what it is. But teams, maybe it's just that teams haven't tried it enough yet. But there are definitely, like, creatives, for instance, pulled it out. And he did, I'd say he did A-okay with it. He did perfectly fine with it. He didn't excel, but he didn't do anything wrong, really. So, I mean, maybe she definitely has potential for A tier. But as of right now, there's clearly something wrong since teams aren't picking it. And until we know what that is, then she'll remain B+ tier, in that she's picked in specific situations. Last but not least, we got Ying. Ying's also kind of like B+ tier. Again, she's a support, so it's hard to compare to the other elements of the tier list. I'm just comparing her to Saris and Snake, really. Like, I think Saris and Snake are not only 1 tier ahead of her, but 2 tiers ahead of her. Like, I would almost potentially pick a pocket strat like a Grover instead of a Ying, just because there's no reason to pick Ying, right? It's no surprise. It's just like, okay, we're picking this worse healer. Like, we're picking this worse healer than Saris and Snake. At least with Grover, you go, okay, we're picking a worse healer, but at least we can catch them off guard. At least we can do something here. Like, we can maybe get some roots, we can get some good old pocket strat going. Whereas Ying's just like, we're just picking a worse healer. That's all it is. So in that sense, like, I wouldn't say she's just below Snake and Saris, because she's really not. She's quite far below. So yeah, that's it. Again, disclaimer, this is my opinion. No one else's opinion. If you don't like my opinion, that's not my problem. This is for competitive play, for esports play, but it kind of applies to most casuals and most ranked games anyways. Some characters are going to be better than others in casuals, but for competitive play, this is my tier list, at least, for OB52.